you focus lately on how to do things right in the correct way, and you give advice on how to build integrations. What would your advice for the integration teams to better position the value of integration?
Yeah, I think so. That I guess the first thing's know your audience, because the value of integration is really difficult to articulate, and I think part of my answer would be a little bit biased in that that's part of the reason I'm at Covi at the minute doing some of the stuff is I think it's difficult for customers to understand the value of integration, where the reality is no customer goes, I want to do an integration project. They always go, I want to do a project that delivers some business value and it happens to need integration to achieve that. So you've got to remember a customer doesn't really want to do integration. And actually, a lot of the times, the problem that they have is they have negative experience of integration. So they always hear that it's hard. They always hear it costs money. They always here's all these integration errors. And the problem that you have is if that's the messaging that they hear, the customer doesn't want to do integration because they view it as being a massive pain point. And I think what you really want to get to, your ideal organization is integration is a key differentiator between us and our competition, because if we do integration well, we know the chances are our competitors probably have pain doing it. So if we can do it cheap, if we can do it, well, when I say cheap, if we can do it cost effective is probably a better term. We can do good quality. I love Kent always talks about flexibility and time to market, which I think is huge. Those old days of BizTalk projects take 6 months before you see any business value back. That's Logic Apps, for example, span that on its head. And I did an integration project in like 2 days once, and I know things are changing a little bit as things get more complex again around security and network and stuff. But we have to balance that. We have to find time to market, being able to change things as requirements change. They're where the value of doing integration well comes into play, because you want your business to feel like integration empowers them to get stuff done, and it doesn't, like, it's not an anchor holding them back. Now the question is, how do you achieve that? It's the difficult bit.
Yeah.
For me, I think one of the first things I'd say is people don't appreciate the value of good comms and PR for the integration team. So you have to really communicate to your stakeholders the things that you're doing that add value and are good, because all they ever hear is other people complaining about what doesn't work. You never ever. So I remember we once had this incident, right? BizTalk example, going back years. And the customer would often be like, oh, the old beep BizTalk, because that's all they ever heard when people complain about it. And this one day we had this huge spike of messages. I can't remember the reason now, but what we were able to do is we had a BizTalk group with many servers in it. And if you remember, one of the great things about BizTalk that I think people never really appreciate is the host-to-host instance model. So normally, if you think of any of the other applications that this customer had, if they had like a 500% spike in load, you either have the application goes down, or you have an absolute nightmare, or you have to massively throw new servers at it. So what we did with BizTalk is, so we've got our BizTalk's throttling, right? Was that, Ahmed will remember that. So the problem was, right, BizTalk's being spiked with all this extra load, but it's protecting itself. And while throttling, many people think it's a negative scenario. Throttling's basically BizTalk protecting itself from breaking other things, other integrations. So what we were able to do is we see the issue, but then what we said was, right, well, if we just add a couple of extra host instances onto a few of our other nodes, we can maximize getting through the backlog of messages, and then increase the throughput, and then move it back when we're done. So what we were able to do is deal with that massive unexpected spike of messages just by reallocating some of our host instances and then putting it back when we're finished. And I kind of had to sit down with them and say, look, you don't really realize what we did here. We didn't throw, I think about the other applications that throw like 10 new servers at it without thinking because they were having load problems. It's like, no, we had no downtime. We had no extra hardware requirements. We just made a small tweak, dealt with your backlog, and instead of it taking days to process, we processed it in like 2 or 3 hours by just reallocating stuff. And then we corrected it, and it's like that's actually a really good story.
Yeah.
But you've got to remember that the non-technical people have no clue what you're talking about. So that ability to communicate in an effective way is really good. I guess if we translate that to Azure, the equivalent of that scenario would be something like we've got that burstable plan on Logic Apps where it can just burst out, process additional nodes, and then burst back in when it's done.
Yeah.
If you think about that, technically that's actually a really hard problem for us to solve. On Azure, Microsoft have made it just a button that we click, and then suddenly it deals with that load. And I think that there you can communicate what the bit of magic that you guys did solve that business problem, and the customer suddenly goes, "Oh, actually, this integration platform is pretty cool. Really, it just magically did that." But if you just do it and nobody knows, then all they hear is the negative stuff.
Exactly.
Yes, it's amazing. I actually, you got my brain running 100 miles per hour because I never saw the way that we did was like, oh, we just create extra host instances, then we just like move them back, and we give extra we give extra space for the specific host. I didn't see those kind. It was just like a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. It's one of those things as well, Ahmed, in cloud. I think people, when we think about the position of apps to app services and that kind of thing, people don't really appreciate the power that BizTalk host instance model had, because you can have your server group, but you can actually control what executes where, and you can move it dynamically to manage your load, and that you can't really do that on maybe you probably could with AKS a little bit, but certainly for a lot of the other PaaS services and SaaS services, you don't really have that, and it give us a lot of options. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to you. If nobody knows what you did, then all they ever hear is the negative stuff, and suddenly your integration platform becomes the thing people don't like. But if they know the good stuff, then suddenly they go, yeah, we want to use it more because we get stuff done, and it's an easy way. I think I see this, I do a lot of the cost stuff now. That's one of the first things I say to people when you're doing cost management is make sure you tell people about the cost savings you identify, because people always hear the bills just getting bigger.
Yeah.
And if you tell people we did this and it saved you X thousand a month, then suddenly people go, can you tell me how you did that? Because we could maybe do the same thing over here.
How it's interesting.